So why don't we get started, and we're going to start with just some quick opening remarks. Again, 2 minutes being the magic number here from our legislators. Which end of the table do we want to start at? This end. Okay. Do you want to go first? Okay.
Mike, do we get closing statements?
Oh yeah, we had done closing statements. We'll try and leave time for some short, maybe a minute or so at the end. Yeah.
Well, I'm Jim Toms, State Senator, District 49. For those that don't know, that's all of Posey County, the western portions of Vandenberg, and the southern portions of Gibson County. And I'm on 3 committees, Corrections and Criminal, Ag and Natural Resources, and Utilities. And I just want to mention that, and most of you probably know this, but when you read the newspapers or you watch TV and you'll see maybe 5 or 6 or 7 issues, and a lot of these are the same ones that are spoken about in the paper. It's noteworthy to know that all of the legislators here are involved in much more than 6 or 7 issues. Our committees alone that each of us are on have multiple bills that we have to hear every week. And for me, it's 3 days a week in committees that consume a lot of time. And we're heavily focused on those bills in our committees, amendments, changes, testimony. So just that alone takes a great deal of time. And then you have the emails and the phone calls and the visitors that come in on top of that. And I just want to share that with everybody so that sometimes I think maybe it might be the perception that we're not quite that busy. And I think all of these will testify that there's virtually no time, I'll say this for myself, for even a dinner. I'll grab a sandwich. That's the best I'll get out of a day. And I just want to share that with you because, as I say, in the paper, when you read these stories, you think, well, this legislator, why do you vote this way? Or why isn't he doing this? There's a great deal that we're all doing that never makes the news. And it is a really full-time job. It's 12 months worth in 4 months. So I just want to share that with you. And thanks for being here today and appreciate this opportunity.
Okay. Thank you.
Good morning. I appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time out to be with us this morning and for us to have the opportunity to share with you some information about what's happening in Indiana. Okay. Is that better? Okay. I serve on the Public Health Committee in the Senate. I have for a number of years. I also serve on Homeland Security, Transportation, and Veterans Affairs. That's one committee as well. And then I also serve on the Public Policy Committee, which looks a lot of times at alcohol and gaming bills in the Senate. About 2 of my bills have passed on 3rd reading already. Senate Bill 153, which really was an idea that came to me from a young man from Newburgh. His name is Matthew Burkert, and I don't know if any of you know Matthew, but he's a soccer player. And he's 13 years old, and he actually brought this to my attention last year that kids between 12 and 14 could not serve as youth referees for soccer. And so he wanted to change the age from 12 instead of 14 so that he could continue to serve as a youth referee because the Soccer Association statewide they found out they were violating state law and they had to discontinue a program where they had 10, 11, 12-year-olds involved. And the benefit of that is if they start with soccer as a player and then they ref, they're more likely to be around in the future for soccer. So we have passed that out of committee and we passed it out of the Senate, and I've sent it over to Representative Crouch and Bacon and Rican to look at that for us. It had no opposition. It passed unanimously. Had another bill that deals with vision screening of kids. It's Senate Bill 553, and it passed the Senate overwhelmingly as well. I think there might have been 1 vote against it, but it changes some of the reporting requirements on vision screenings in schools and adds also the 5th grade to a vision screening. Right now we have it as the kindergarten and then 3rd and 8th grade. But a child's eyes change a lot between the ages of 5 and 13. And so we want to try to get at any kind of abnormalities that might occur. And the bill had no opposition to it, and it doesn't cost money because most of the screenings are done by A lot of them are Lions Club members, or your nurse can do it. Certain screenings are required to be done by ophthalmologist or optometrist, and they donate their time as well. So it's passed over. We also, in public policy, looked at am I done? A gaming bill that has a lot of implications for the city of Evansville, but it's in the early stages. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning. It's good to see you all here. I look forward to discussing some of the issues that maybe some of you have been mentioning to me. The UI benefits issue and Faith's Law, because I guess we're going to be out. And I know there's some folks who are here that wanted to talk about that, and I'll meet you afterward out in the hallway. I've also put, I always forget this, on the table out there, I have my last week report, and as well as a circular on the public schools and some myths about public education. And anyone that wants to get on my email list, all you do is sign up out there, and I send out weekly reports. There's the 3 or 4 things that have happened this last week that I thought maybe I'd bring to you today. First of all, some exciting news to those who are interested in the children's services is that it looks like we're taking 3 bills and we're going to put them into one, and this is the Commission on Children, which will look at overall status of children in the state of Indiana and receive reports and set some priorities and some positions and educate us as well as the public. Internally, there will be an oversight committee, which will be mostly legislators that will probably deal more with the nuts and bolts and operations and policy within government. And then we're reviewing right now the child fatality review system, and it looks like we will have the health department involved in a major role on a state level, providing a coordinator, and we're going to see a lot of more communication and transparency in that, so that we have better statistics about all of our children and the child deaths in the state of Indiana. Interesting bill on biosimilars. I had never heard of this before. You'll want to watch it. They're genetically engineered drugs from living organisms, and we had the beginning of this discussion. I think there's some tests that are going on here in Evansville, but anyway, this is great news for those who suffer from some very serious diseases. Mopeds have come up again. I think we're going to see something this time. Let's hope. Keep the emails coming. There's some resistance. And then on the precious metals, even though Evansville has a law that helps protect victims, this is on the We Buy Gold. Hopefully we'll see that statewide. That passed out of committee, and I think we'll see something statewide to protect our citizens. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Tom Washburn. I represent District 64, which is roughly Vincennes to Evansville and points east-west from that, parts of 5 different counties. I am a freshman, and it's been a very interesting learning experience. And I got to tell you, it's really encouraging that you folks are all here and engaged. And I'll tell you why. When you read a bill up there and you see a provision and you say, this looks a little squirrely, and you might call it a bill's sponsor. And they say, I don't know why that's in there. And then maybe you call it a lobbying group or somebody to kind of help that legislator with that bill, and they say, I don't know why it's in there. And, the vetting process that goes on in committee is real. And the vetting process that goes on the floor is real. And so constituent input is critical. When we're looking at these bills, they've got to be read. So if it's within a area of your expertise and the industry that affects you, read them. Because what is squirrely may be squirrely. It may not be. I'm not trying to fault anybody necessarily, but the Indiana process, where it's a part-time legislature and things are happening fast and in a hurry, really requires consistent constituent input from the industries affected. And this is a great encouragement to me to see so many people engaged and wanting to be a part of the process, because we really need you. I look forward to our discussion. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Wendy McNamara. I represent Posey County, well, the majority of it, and the west side of Evansville and north side around North Park. I have had an extremely busy week. 5 of my bills were heard this week. They were either in committee, on seconds, or on thirds. So for me, it was an extremely busy week of testimony and preparing the bills and vetting some of the issues with them and putting on strange amendments and taking off the other ones. So Just to give you a little idea of the committees I sit on are government and regulatory reform, and government reduction, judiciary, and courts. And judiciary and courts, a lot of the criminal law, a lot of those issues go through there, and majority of my bills were in those two two committees, and then wound up in Ways and Means for a couple hours on Tuesday. So couple of bills of interest. One is the Blue Alert legislation, and that bill passed out of the House this week. And I was approached by the Sheriff's Association to take this bill. And what it does, it works like the Amber Alert system or the Silver Alert system. If a police officer is killed or injured in the line of duty or goes missing, Blue Alert will go out across the state of Indiana through the Indiana State Police's system, and it'll alert folks and hopefully aid in the apprehension of the offender in that particular case. The idea is to give a lot more ease of mind to the officers that are out there defending us, and hopefully nobody gets away with something that they shouldn't. Other bills, one bill I've been working on for 2 years is in youthful sentence. We're talking about juveniles who've committed very serious crimes. They could be anywhere from murder to armed robbery to whatever. And these individuals have been tried as an adult, convicted as an adult. In the state of Indiana, our Department of Corrections does not have the ability to place these youth in a setting in which they could get the same type of services that your traditional juvenile offender would get. They would be placed in an adult facility by themselves. They wouldn't have access to juvenile education, special education. They'd have an education, but it wouldn't be the same type that a juvenile would receive. So this bill would give us the opportunity to not throw the kid away and try to give them some sort of rehabilitative services that they deserve, psychological, educational, whatever it might be. This particular bill is controversial only in the fact that when they're 18, their case is looked at again to see if this particular individual needs to have a lesser sentence, not necessarily lighter, but lesser sentence, and the prosecutors have some objection to that particular thing. Although I think we fixed the bill to make them happy. All right, so have a great day. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Thanks, Kim. Thank you all very much. I sit on the House Ways and Means Committee, which is the fiscal committee, and that's where the budget originates. Actually, the governor submits a budget proposal to the budget committee and the House Ways and Means, and this coming week, we will offer our amendment to the governor's budget. We have heard up to now from every agency in state government what their needs are and what they're wanting money for. In addition, any bill that has a fiscal impact of over $50,000 has to come to Ways and Means, and then we vote on those bills. And of course, they will have a fiscal that also will have to be factored into the budget. We did hear a bill on Thursday that will greatly affect the budget and what we do with it. And that is a bill that it's House Bill 1541, and it proposes to eliminate the automatic taxpayer deduction. It also proposes to reduce the income tax percentage from 3.4 to 3.06. In addition, it also accelerates the phase out of the inheritance tax. So that's going to have a pretty large fiscal impact depending on what we do with it. So you can look for that amendment to come out of the House Ways and Means this week. It'll go then to the House floor where amendments will be put on it, and there will be amendments in Ways and Means Committee also. And then by February 26th, I think is the date we're looking at, we'll be finished with our business in the House, and that budget bill will go to the Senate, and they'll have an opportunity to rework it before it comes back and has to be worked on by both the House and Senate for a final vote before April 20. Oh, I just wanted to see if they knew. 29th. Thank you.
Well, that's just how we rehearsed it, right, Representative Crouch? Because our first question is about the budget. So let's have Brenda Bergwitz come up and ask her question.
Y'all excuse me, I don't have a cold. I'm on a BiPAP machine the last few days, and it don't like me. It opens up everything in my head, so excuse me. I have Governor Pence's budget plan that in front of each and every one of you, and I would just like to ask if you are going to support the tax cut plan and budget, or are you going to wait until April till the economic forecast report comes out? And if so, why will you protect the government instead of the taxpayer? And that's for all of you. It wants to answer it.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping in touch. And it's so important that you all do kind of keep up with what's going on. You can always go to in.gov, the website, and you can also follow the bills and what the status is and watch all the proceedings on the internet. And that's very important to be engaged with your government. It's really too soon to tell, Brenda. I mean, we'll have a budget that may have that in, may not. It may be put in later. It may not. There may be something come out and something go in, and certainly there will be no final decisions made till after the revenue forecast in April. I think it's important that, number one, we restore some funding to areas that, have suffered some cuts in the past. I think it's also important that we have a healthy surplus for emergencies or if the economy tends to go down in the future. And I think it's important that we don't have tax increases on working Hoosiers and Hoosiers that are not working. So I guess I'm not trying to dodge your question. I certainly, as I think most of us are, in favor of reducing the amount of money that people pay to the government. But it's too soon to tell what. There's also people out here that thinks the phase out of the inheritance tax should happen. We should accelerate that phase out. So all that's going to have to be considered, and those decisions, final decisions, probably won't be made till after that April forecast. But thank you for the question.
The problem I have is with certainty. And it isn't certainty about our state government. It's uncertainty with our federal government. I don't know if we can predict with any confidence the wave that's going to come out of Washington, D.C. when you continue to spend, substantially more than you're taking in and you're amassing tremendous debt. The economic repercussions for that for Indiana could swamp us. And so it makes me nervous to enact permanent cuts. I probably will support it if the Ways and Means folks who study this say that it is viable. Okay, I don't have no problem with tax cuts, but I also want to kind of put things in perspective. We're cutting, was it 3.4% to 3.06%? So you make $1 million a year. Okay, you're paying, what is that, $34,000 or something like that income tax. Now you're going to pay maybe $30,600. That's like a $3,400 cut. If you're making $50,000 a year, you may be talking $150. I mean, it sounds great, but I mean, this isn't the Indiana isn't taxing you that much. I mean, no tax is great, but 3%, isn't. Our problem is the federal government. They're taxing us way too much, and so I don't want to come across at all as being against it, but I want to put some reality grounding into what it is a little bit here, and just caution that the wave that's coming with Medicaid, the wave that's coming with out of control inflation, we got to be thinking about these things.
Thank you. And I'd add two other considerations too. And I think both of these comments so far have been really good. But the Medicaid again, and what we're going to do, we don't have any idea what's coming out of public health regarding Medicaid in the budget and the expansion for the state of Indiana. So that's really is that's high on my list right now. As well as I need to make sure there are a couple things that are protected for children's services. One of them is that there's a proposed $35 million, what shall I say? I don't want to say payback, but monies that should go back into DCS that help with that department to provide services to children, as well as the hotline that we talked about coming back, and folks wanted to make sure that we had local control. The total budget for that is going to be about $8.8 million. And there is a couple of million that DCS, the Department of Children's Services, feel that they've got that they can cover it, but you're still talking about $6 million. I know it doesn't sound a lot, but I'll be watching to make sure that those two expenses are covered.
I appreciate the question, Brenda, but I think it, as has already been said, it's really too soon to say. I will say that before I would consider cuts, I want to restore the cuts that have already been made over the last 4 or 5 years to public education, in particular, $300 million. And what has been proposed does not even begin to offset the cuts that have been made to public schools in the past. And there's also bills out there that will continue to take money away from public schools. So I think in addition to that, I'm also very concerned school safety in our schools and funding for that potentially. But a lot of it has to do with mental health issues for kids as well as adults. We have underfunded mental health for many years in the state of Indiana. And I think we need to put our money where our mouth is if we're truly concerned about what's happening in society and the lack of opportunity for people who need those services to access those services. And in particular, I'm also very concerned about what is going to be, as Representative Washburn said, what is it we're going to have to fund that comes down from the feds that we don't know yet? The Affordability Act. We are going to have increases in Medicaid that are not in this budget in the future. And so I think we have to be very careful when we start spending that we keep a very healthy surplus for future so that we don't end up, we have not raised taxes except to cut property taxes. The 1% sales tax that was increased several years ago went to cut property taxes. It didn't go for other state services. And so I think we have to be very careful.
Thanks, Brenda. That's one of the things too is that I said before in our last month about all the numbers aren't in yet either, and I know all of that sounds good about the tax cuts, and I'd be the first that'd like to have that tax cut, but I'm really worried about this Affordable Health Care Act and how it's going to impact our state. And I know those that's involved with our state budget that's a big cloud right now. Nobody understands fully the impact that will have. And we have the reduction or the elimination of the inheritance tax, and I like that we can get the monkey off the back of our citizens. That's the number one thing for me, and everything I deal with up there is how it impacts the citizens. I know we have lobbyists from corporations and people with big money that come in and they have an interest and they want a bill passed or there's something that they're looking at. But for me, whatever we do, the number one thing, my allegiance is to the people back home and how it affects their daily lives. Most of the folks that I know are just doing well to hold their own right now. A lot of people feel they're pinned down. There's no breathing room anymore. So when we do things, I want to make sure that it's not going to make the water any higher on them, that we're not going to sink people here. But I do realize that, there's a certain amount of money that's going to come in revenues, and everybody has something that they need help with their budgets, their finances. The soil and water districts, for example, they're struggling. Their budgets is diminishing. There's the health industry. There's groups that with education, all sorts of groups that require some assistance from the state. Roads and bridges. There's the counties are hurting. So it's a very tough call up there when we talk about do we cut money here and how will that affect us on having the funds necessary to help other people that desperately need that help as well. So it's a tough balance, and I just want to share it with you. But in your question, would I support government or the citizens? The citizens come first. That's one of the reasons why I ran. I just don't trust government that much anymore. So the only way to do something about it was get in it. Thank you.
It's always hard to go last because they have said a lot of what you need to say. And I agree with everything that everybody that's presented here today. I just think back to a conversation we had at dinner last night with my brother-in-law. We share some agricultural land, and he's asking us if we should go ahead and sell some of our corn because he needs to pay his taxes. And his comment was, my Indiana taxes aren't so bad, but it's the federal government taxes that are killing me. So rather than waiting, for a better corn price, he asked us if we'd be willing to go ahead and sell right now so that he could be able to afford his taxes. My concern is just making sure that if we are going to do a tax cut, it's going to be significant enough, something that will actually be able to make an impact on our lives. And Tom gave you some figures. I don't know that is significant enough to make an impact on your life. Above all, comments said to me this week, I was talking with somebody from northern Illinois, now northern Indiana. They're moving from Illinois to Indiana in great numbers. I'd like to see the actual numbers because of the taxing situation in Illinois. So I'm thankful for Indiana. I'm thankful for the way that we've been able to be prudent with our taxes. I would like to see the same continuance again. But we're lucky in a lot of ways. I don't know if we're, we are fortunate. I heard somebody say that out there. But again, I'd like to see something that's significant. And thinking back to my first year, the first session, we did not know really anything about the budget till that last week, primarily because it goes to conference committee. A lot of discussions, a lot of things are taken in and out, and then you have your line items in there as well. But thank you again for bringing the question to us.
All right, our next question is about the Leucadia plant, House Bill 1515 and a couple of Senate bills, and John Blair has that question.
Good morning. I'm here to talk about House Bill 1515 and Senate Bill 510. Both of these bills are close to identical as they stand now. We understand that there may be some amendments added that would change the language somewhat, but I'm here representing Valley Watch and the Sierra Club and some other groups, and we've been dealing with this issue now since 2006 when it was first announced by the governor's office. At that time,
and this is the Rockport coal gasification plant, just so that everyone knows.
At that time, the price of natural gas was about $9 a million BTU and on the rise, and then it went up to 13 or so. But then something called hydraulic fracturing came in, and now we're washing gas. We're washing gas and oil all over the country, really. But in any case, the price of natural gas this weekend was $3.30 a million BTU. The price that's stated in the contract and keeps getting reported in the media for the gas that comes out of this plant will be $6.60, which is just twice what the gas is selling for today. But the $6.60 figure isn't accurate either, because if you look at the contract seriously, you'll see that the figure is really closer to 10. And they don't guarantee savings until the end of the contract. Well, that contract was thrown out by the Indiana Court of Appeals, so that today there is no contract. So any discussion that says, well, you got to honor a contract is all mute, because there is no contract now, because there was a clause that actually Leucadia negotiated in the contract with the Indiana Finance Authority, which says that if any court finds any part of this contract to be null and void, the entire contract's null and void. Now, I think it's section 15.2. In any case,
your time is getting short.
Okay, so there is no contract. The prices are going to punish Indiana consumers for the next 30 years so that a New York hedge fund can get very, very rich.
And on some of these questions, when there's a clear pro-con, we do ask if there's an opposing viewpoint that would like to be heard. Is there anybody who would like to speak in favor of the Rockport coal gasification plant briefly? Yeah, go ahead, sir. And from the microphone, please, yes.
Thank you. First of all, thank all of you for making Indiana a place that attracts companies to come to Indiana and do business. It's much appreciated. My name is Pat Meehan with the Meehan Group, a small business in Indiana and Evansville, in our 22nd year. As you know, Indiana Gasification is making a $3 billion investment to build the state-of-the-art coal gasification plant and a CO2 pipeline just 2 counties east of Vandenberg County in Rockport, Indiana. The plant is one of the cleanest coal facilities, will be one of the cleanest coal facilities in the world, 99% cleaner than conventional power plant by safely capturing and removing pollutants at the front end. The plant will also include water recycling and a zero discharge water process treatment system. The plant will produce substitute natural gas by refining coal, not burning it, Illinois Basin coal, which includes southern Indiana coal, southern Illinois coal, and western Kentucky coal. The plant will supply 17% of Indiana's requirement and diversify the position of Indiana's gas supply. Diversification always helps competitive pricing. And the carbon dioxide from this plant will be captured, liquefied, and piped through a new pipeline from Rockport, Indiana to the Gulf Coast and injected into existing and depleted oil wells that already exist, which will produce millions of barrels of U.S. oil each year. Vectren Corporation has fought tooth and nail to squash this project of a Fortune 500 company that will invest $3 billion in our local community in southern Indiana and provide 1,500 high-paying construction jobs and 300 full-time jobs after that, high-paying, high-tech jobs in southern Indiana. Not to mention the good it would do for the coal industry in our area. Indiana gasification is here to stay, and Vectren in all its resistance has not been convincing to provide any proof that this project is anything but good for Indiana. Vectren does have, and continues to have, the highest electric rates in the state of Indiana. What can we expect from our legislators this year to preserve this $3 billion investment job creating project for southern Indiana? Thank you.
Thanks. All right, sure.
Thank you. I just might need a little more than 2 minutes just to explain. I want to try to give people background on where we are with that plant and the purpose of my House Bill 1515. Back in...
You have just been given an extra 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
By your
Okay,
very
I'll be
generous
very
colleague
quick.
to my left. So you have 4 minutes now.
Back when this first bill came in 2000, I believe it was 2007, we voted on it in the General Assembly, and I was a co-author of the bill because at that time, gas prices were so incredibly high, natural gas prices, and that this particular plant said that they could produce it at a less price, which would be a cost savings to Indiana ratepayers. What happened is that the utilities would not commit and go and sign a contract to buy the gas from the Leucadia or from the Indiana gasification. So what happened in 2009 is because private sector wouldn't participate in that contract, they thought it was a bad deal, we gave the Indiana Finance Authority the authority to enter into the contract on behalf of Indiana ratepayers. What happens is that they will buy the gas from Indiana Gasification, Indiana Finance Authority, this is a government agency, buys that gas, and then they sell it on the open market. And if the cost that they sell it at is less than what Leucadia or Indiana Gasification has to pay, then that is passed on to the customer, the ratepayer. If it's more, then that is passed on to the ratepayer. And the way the contract that the Indiana Finance Authority drafted is that, and this wasn't what we were told back in 2007, if there are losses, 100% of the losses go to the ratepayer. If there are gains, it's split between the ratepayer and the company. Now, Indiana Gasification will say, well, we've got $150 million we're setting aside in an escrow to cover the losses. What they're projecting is there'll be, Vectren and other utilities are projecting they're going to be a $1 billion losses in the first 8 years. If that's true, that $150 million is going to be eaten up in the first year, and then the losses will be put on the ratepayers' bills, and it'll comprise 17% of your bill. It's just going to be a cost you're going to pay to subsidize a project that could be losing money. Anyway, what House Bill 1515 does, because things have changed and we don't want to be in a position where taxpayers are subsidizing 100% of a project that may be losing 100% money, is that bill says that every 3 years that the Indiana Gasification has to calculate, or the Indiana Finance Authority has to calculate whether there's been losses or there's been gains. And if there have been losses, that the Indiana Gasification needs to reimburse that back onto the ratepayers' bills. If there's been gains, those should be passed on to the ratepayer, so that the ratepayer is protected from having to fully subsidize something that could end up costing a lot of money. People will say there's jobs. I'm all for jobs. I vote for every job initiative there is. I voted for this back in 2007 and 2009. But if there are billion-dollar losses in 8 years, the cost of those losses are going to be $2.4 million per job. And I guess at what cost is a job worth? So that's kind of the background, and I'm sorry if I went over. Thank you.
Thanks.
And just to let you know, the Senate had a hearing. They have a companion bill, one just like it. They were supposed to hear it in the Senate committee this past Thursday, and the chairman pulled it at the last minute. It's scheduled to be heard this Thursday, and I don't know if it will be. I think that on the House side, the attitude is to kind of take a wait and see what the Senate does. But ladies and gentlemen, this is where the big money meets the big money. And quite honestly, ratepayers should not be on the hook.
Thanks. Let's hear from the Senate side, and
Okay.
Senator Toms is going to talk.
Thanks, Micah. I want to tell you, last Sunday, this bill was wearing on my mind. We were in church, and I could not get this out of my head. It overtook my thoughts. And the sermon was about lack of concentration. We got back in the car. I told Marge, I said, the whole day was wasted because I could not shake this out of my mind. This is a very serious matter. And in fact, at 3 o'clock Monday morning, I was laying there in bed awake again about this bill. Now, we hear a lot of bills, a lot of serious bills and corrections, horrible bills of people that are dealing with horrible situations. This bill here is just as important. I'm a coal guy. I like coal. That's an industry that provides a lot of jobs. And as it's all been said here, this deal was cut years ago, and at the time it did seem like a good idea. But with this fracking that John was talking about, it's a new technology where they can make vertical drills and tap in natural gas that couldn't just a few years ago. So it's changed the entire game on this thing. I want to see these jobs. I got a lot of letters from the guys in construction, and I understand, that will provide good work for these people. And not all those construction workers will be from Indiana, but a great many of them probably will. But the thing is that the individuals, the ratepayers, and what will become of them, the ones that's working on that project, if it were to happen, they're still going to pay those utility increases as well. But there's also people that are on fixed incomes. I bet there's people in here right now that's got family members, mom and dads maybe, that are struggling just to get groceries anymore. And that's got to take precedence. That's something I cannot get out of my mind is what we're doing for those people there. They have nowhere to go. And so Senator Merritt, I was glad I was glad that he didn't give the bill a hearing Thursday. It was in our Utilities Committee, because he understands too the impact this has and how serious the matter it is. I know that Senator Eckedy, that was his bill. I think they worked 3 hours the night before trying to change this thing, trying to address it, but it's still not there yet. And ultimately, we're probably going to be faced with making a vote on this thing. There's nowhere to run. But I just want to share with you that the number one thing is the people back home and how these things apply to them, and that's the number one thing on my mind as well. So just want to share that with you.
Thanks. Representative Rican.
Thank you. Probably no one in this room has been more critical of some of the utility companies than I have been over the last several years. And one of the things that I have learned, is that for them, as much as they can pass on to the ratepayer, they will do. And that has been the situation here locally. I do have a problem with the fact that this is coming before us only because I believe it becomes more political than it does the nuts and bolts, and I strongly feel that it really ought to go back to the IURC for a decision. And I will say that I've also been critical of the IURC because I feel that when it comes to the issues of affordable, which takes into account what we're going to pay in our rates, they really do not use that in their judgment. They use the concept of reasonable and just. But I do feel that we really need to take it out of the political arena and put it back with them. They operate as a court, so to speak, and look at the facts themselves. We've heard a lot of one side of the story. And I would say that Spencer County, Tom Utter, is going to be in Indianapolis at 11 o'clock on Monday in room 336 just to educate folks who want to see their side of the story. And I think if the best thing that we can do is listen to both sides, but in the end, I sincerely hope that the majority, which will control this vote, will take it back to the IURC. That's the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to throw in that this is a really interesting issue because I've been approached by both sides, and I've been approached on both sides by really smart people talking really wisely. And the issue really does come down to what John raised, and that is, what is the long-term prospects of the price of gas? Okay, and you've heard the arguments, I guess, so far on the side saying that this is a bad deal for the state, and it may be. I am really keeping an open mind. I really am, but I will say that some really smart people have approached me and said, the reason why the price of gas is so low right now is because the market is flooded. It's like the drought last summer when they had to slaughter all the cattle. The price of beef goes down and then it comes back up. And there is a point at which you cannot profitably produce gas. And there's big arguments on what that point is. The testimony before the IURC, I believe, was around $7 per million BTU is what they were saying. That if it drops below that, which it is right now, that can't be sustained by these companies because they can't make enough money to make it worthwhile. There's some evidence out there that they're withdrawing their drilling rigs because of that. And the exploration is slowing down on gas because you can't sell gas at this and make enough money to justify it. We've got to get it right because we all have friends and family who are involved in coal in this area. And we've got to find a clean way to use our coal because our country needs it. And I'm not coming down on one side or the other, but as my friends used to say, it's a mighty thin pancake, and cooked on both sides. And the fascinating thing to me on this one is that there are really, really smart people on both sides. And, I think there's some merit about kicking it back to the utility regulatory people so some really smart people can look at it. And that's no commentary at all on Suzanne's bill, because the true-up is a fascinating aspect too, but that would take another 10, 15 minutes to get into. But I did want to throw out some more about this.
All right, thank you. Let's move on now to a question about a grandparents' bill, and this is Carolyn Meadows.
Hello. I'd like to speak to you today on the grandparents' rights bill that Senator Steele has, and that's Bill 171. It's going to come up for a vote in the Senate this coming Wednesday, and I'll be testifying along with a group that I formed in 2009 of grandparents' rights bill. And 80% of grandparents have the right to petition the court for visitation with their grandchildren. 20% do not. If they have at their death, unwed, or what's the other one? There's death, unwed, divorce. Well, there's 3 reasons why the majority have that right to petition that court, and the 20% are the ones that are still married. So many have the idea that this bill is going to interfere with that, the parents. This has nothing to do with that. This is about the children getting to see the grandparents. They're taken away from the grandparents for frivolous reasons. Many, like, if you don't give me money, you don't get to see these children. I imagine there's several here in the audience that have the problem. How many of you have the problem of not getting to see your grandchildren? That's what I thought. Several. Our 3-year-old granddaughter screamed to go home with us. and her mother wouldn't let her. She said, why? Why? What did I do? They blame themselves. No fault of their own. It's a grudge. They use these children as pawns to settle their grudges, whatever it be. And I asked the representatives and senators here, when this comes up for vote, please vote. It's for the children. One article I read in the paper this week when a father died, and the mother didn't want the grandparents seeing the children. And the article said, decency doesn't demand it. It absolutely insists. And I gave each one of you a copy of Senator Steele's comments on he feels it's unconstitutional that 20% don't get to see their grandchildren and the 80% do.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Reaction?
Thank you, Carolyn. This issue's come before Family and Children last year, and I hope to see it again this year. And certainly, I believe that the grandparents ought to have that right. The 20% of the grandparents that don't have that now. And you're right. We've heard testimony certainly where the children are used as pawns. And if we truly want to put the children number one, and that is our goal, no matter what we look at, whether it's grandparent, aunt, or uncle, that's what we need to look at. And I think it will probably this year receive some real serious consideration, and I do hope it passes. It's not only this, it's fathers who want more visitation. It's everything. Let's look at the child and let's make the decisions in the best interest of the child. So I wish you good luck. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. And I know Senator Steele's worked hard on this. This is for years on this measure. And again, this goes back to what I said a while ago in Criminal and Corrections Committee. Some of the issues we deal with is just extraordinary. It's just unbelievable. And some of the things that I don't think most of us would think would even be a problem, that there's these loopholes and these gaps in state law that doesn't provide for what you're dealing with here, or either that it's written that it creates a problem. So I'm looking forward to helping Senator Steele on this, and I can't imagine what that's like to be a grandparent and not be able to have your grandchildren. Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll be very brief, but I appreciate you being here. I know you had some distance to travel, Carolyn, and I do think it's very unfortunate when children are used as pawns, and it happens with other parents as well as grandparents. And so I'll be looking forward to hearing about Senator Steele's bill. I don't think you gave us a bill number, but we'll certainly 171. We'll take a look at that. If it's being heard, it'll come. If it comes to the floor, we'll certainly take a close look at it.
Okay, great, thank you. A question now about school vouchers, and that's from Kathy Parks.
Good morning. I am Kathy Parks. I'm a 42-year experienced teacher in the South Gibson School District, and I come to you today to ask where each of you will stand as House Bill 1003 has passed now out of the Education Committee. This is a bill which expands significantly in a number of directions the school voucher issue that has been before you before. We've heard this panel in previous years committed to not having vouchers. We have them. We have the largest one in the country, and now this bill seeks to expand that both to participants' eligibility for vouchers and in dollars expended from the same account that funds public schools. Some key pieces, perhaps, that would interest this group. The cost estimate for this portion of the expansion is in the neighborhood of $47 million. The governor's budget, which was proposed suggests adding $40 million to the total amount for school funding. So this exceeds that by $7 million. And as Senator Becker pointed out, we're already about $600 million that's been taken out from public school funding over the last 2 years. So more students would be eligible to take your tax dollars to private and parochial schools. Parents would be able to use tax alleviation for materials and books for private schools and homeschooling, but we don't provide school books for children in public schools. One of the few states in the country that does not fully fund books and materials for our students in our public schools. I would like to know where this group stands, and I would like to poll you on that regarding your position when this bill comes to the floor, and certainly a version of it comes before the Senate. And I thank you for your service. I thank you for your support of our kids. They're all our kids, and so thank you for doing that. I'll be eager to hear your reply. Thank you.
Thank you. And since this is another one of those clear pro-con issues, is there somebody who would like to briefly speak in favor of voucher expansions? Yes, sir.
My name is Jeffrey Day. I did not come here today prepared to speak on this issue, but I'm fully in support of the vouchers. Why do you really dislike poor people? Because basically when you get down to it, the majority of the Senate on the Democrat side, they don't want the poor people to have the right to go to schools. I've got a very good friend that's going to have her granddaughter going to school on a voucher with a Lutheran church. Basically, you're going to take that away from the poor people. Why?
Two comments. We limit it to 2 comments. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so we just... No. 2 comments from the audience. Yeah. Yeah. No, we've had 2. Yes, we've had 2. Exactly. Yes. Yes. Okay. So we turn it now to the legislators. Who wants to start? Yeah, Wendy.
On already. Okay. I did not support the voucher bill in the last session, and primarily because most of you know that I'm in education. And if you go back to the studies of 1992 when vouchers first began in Milwaukee, that's where I was really formed on school scholarships. I really admire the intent behind it. Don't get me wrong. I want to give everybody the opportunity to seek education where it's best for them. But if you look at the studies of what happened in Milwaukee, not much changed with the voucher system. And 20 years later, still not much changed with the voucher system in Milwaukee. In this particular case, there's a lot of discussion that went on to get to levels of the funding for the vouchers for the bill that ultimately passed. In my opinion, give it some time to see if it's working. Give it some time to see if it's going to have the impact that you expect it to have. And like I said, the intent behind it is absolutely admirable. I have no problem trying to do the best. And if you look to Representative Crouch's Bill 1004, that starts with our youngest kids. It gives a pilot to try to get kids started off on the right foot. Because if you don't get them started off the right way, you're constantly going to try to be catching them up. Okay? And so I will tell you, I won't support this bill. Probably won't support this bill in any type of form, with any type of amendments. And it's not because I don't love kids, don't love the opportunities that are presented to them, but you need to see that it works. You need to see what we've done in the state of Indiana, see if before we expand something. And like I said, I admire the fact that they're trying to help, but The statistics for me just aren't there. Thanks.
Good morning. I have spoken on this issue before, and we had a meeting prior to this meeting with officials, with Dr. Smith, with EVSC, and several other school corporations and their concerns about vouchers. And I think it's all related because now schools are being graded A through F, which everybody says is not right. The system they're using is not correct, and yet this is what's information's been given out to the public about our schools, and it's not correct. Even the Department of Education indicated it's not correct. So I think, personally, before we move any further on vouchers, we need to see results, as Representative McNamara has indicated. We already have choice for parents. We have choice for parents. We've had choice for parents in EVSC for over 10 years. So I think we need to be very cautious. We also have, this also relates, EVSC's lost $30 million since 2008. If you think that doesn't affect our kids in public schools, you're wrong. It does. And a school can't change their staffing. They can't change the cost of utilities. They can't change the cost of insurance or health care because they may lose 100 kids. They are still going to have the same staffing because 100 kids out of 23,000 is not very many, or 200. But when you start taking away the ADM of about $6,500 per child that goes away from that school, and yet they have the same fixed cost, it's not made up anywhere. So I think we really need to be very cautious before we move into this area. I didn't support vouchers in the first place because I think public education is our constitutional duty first and foremost. I think parents have the choice, they've always had the choice to send their kids to private schools. And I think that should be as it should continue the way it always was before we passed this bill.
Thanks, Micah. Well, Kathy, I didn't vote for the voucher bill. And I know that this is, and I was in that meeting this morning as well. I know there's a lot of discussion about the finances and that approach and all. One of the things that concerned me was that, we've got folks that are putting their kids in some of these private schools. They're paying a lot of money for that. And I think when they find it, we're changing this program now that someone can take their child out of a public school and put them in that private school, and these parents are, in a sense, subsidizing it with their tax dollars. Just doesn't sit too well. It's not that I don't want anyone to get a good education, but we was told that the idea here is we want a good education, we want to improve our schools. Well, Indiana's got a lot of school districts. Not all schools are doing well. But I don't think to purge the schools of their students is a fix for those schools. I would rather see what those individual schools need, and let's direct our attention on fixing that problem, fixing that one school. If it's a district, fix the school district. But what I seen here 2 years ago in these reforms, and a lot of those was in play long before I became elected, but it looked like we was painting everything with one brush. And I visited a lot of the schools in my district. I visited some here in Evansville, in Posey County, and Mount Vernon. I want to try to get it in Gibson too. But I got to tell you, the schools I've been to, they might not be the most elaborate schools, but I got to tell you, the schools I've been in, those teachers are doing their level best. I can tell this, and those kids are doing well in them schools too. I could see the attitude and the behavior and the atmosphere. And to set a program in place that might purge them students out of that school doesn't seem like the fix for me. It just doesn't seem like that's the way we ought to go. So, no, I won't support it. I'd rather, let's fix the problem, not make a bigger one. And that's my position on it.
Thank you. Yes, and I attended the meeting this morning as well, and I do appreciate the input that we got. And let me tell you just a couple of things, and I do want to talk about the poor, because I think that was the original reason that folks really got excited about the voucher system, was that it would give opportunity to those who otherwise could not afford alternatives. But I questioned at that point when it first came up whether that really was the intent, and I am convinced now with 1003 that it never was the intent of the voucher program. There are a couple things that happen in 1003 to prove that point. Number one, the pool of the children that will be eligible is increasing. They're increasing the guidelines. It's now the income guidelines are 150% of the free and reduced, and that's about $64,000 for a family of 4. It's going to eventually go to 300%, which means that a family will be able to make close to $130,000, a family of 4, and get vouchers. The idea of vouchers is far greater than what we originally were told about vouchers. And I think for my point in listening to the discussion, we need to go back to what is really wrong with our schools, and it's hard for me to find that in the Evansville-Vanderburg school system. When I talk about the equity schools, when I talk about the community schools, the variation, the flexibility, the opportunity for people on the bottom rung of the ladder within their individual schools to fashion those schools to the kids that are going there. There's no, I don't get that anywhere else that I talk to school corporations in the state of Indiana. We really do have the opportunity here, at least in our school system here, to grow and to flourish and to be the best for our children. And I don't believe that it's through the vouchers. Thank you.
All right, I guess I was the fly in the ointment at the meeting this morning, and I suppose I'm the fly in the ointment now. We have two constitutional duties under Education, Article 8. The one is to provide for a uniform system of common schools. The other is it shall be the duty of the General Assembly to encourage by all suitable means moral, intellectual, scientific, and agricultural improvement. Okay, to me, vouchers is one of those means that you can do it. But you know, I think it's a tremendous distraction to us all. And the reason why it's a distraction is we're talking like 0.8% of funding. You know, we're talking $6 billion plus as the public schools get. We're talking, you know, in the millions for this voucher stuff. There's 1.1 million kids in our public schools. We're talking 7,500 vouchers statewide. Okay, just a few kids. Most of them are in really terrible, tragic situations where they've got real problems, and most of them aren't here. Okay, and think about the marketing on this. When we concentrate on vouchers and how evil this minuscule voucher program is, it's really us saying our public schools are so bad that if we gave people the chance to leave, they would flee. I don't believe that for a second. Even the voucher cap is like 15,000 or something. Only half of them been used anyways. The real issue is the money. And education has taken a hit for it. It needs some more money. I understand that. I'm with you on that. But I think the vouchers are a distraction. I think they serve a limited purpose, and they don't cause me problems. And again, I want to reiterate, I have no problem with the public school. I really don't. I'm with you. I think you're doing a great job. And in fact, I feel like I have more confidence in you than you do yourselves.
Thank you. I did support vouchers 2 years ago. I support a parent's and a family's choice in their education. Having said that, on 1003, I'm undecided on that. So, you know, the thing that I want you all to understand, or to understand the process is, we're very familiar, each of us up here, in the bills that we hear in our committee. I'm on Ways and Means and I'm on Health, and Wendy's on something else, and everyone up here is on different committees. There are 600 bills filed in each house. So the bills that I'm most familiar with are the ones I've heard in committee. It's not until they reach the floor of the House and that we caucus and we learn what's in them and how they affect different people, and we hear from constituents, that we really are in a position to make a decision. So at this point in time, I'm undecided on that bill.
I think that's everyone, right? Let's move on. Is this on? Yes. Okay. Let's move on to a question on unemployment issues, and this is Kayla. Is it Fowler? Am I saying that right?
To this meeting. Sorry. To this meeting. We're here to represent the Community Action Program of Evansville, Indiana. We're now being asked to repay monies for an underlying bill that was not read correctly, as our understanding. We're asking, will this bill be readdressed to establish our unemployment? We're a group of underpaid teachers that need our money.
Also, we would like to know from Gail and Vanita Becker that are we going to see the change being pushed through, and where are we standing now with the bill?
And which bill is this?
We're not really
I
for
can't
sure
remember the bill's name.
It's a bill dealing with
Unemployment.
unemployment.
Yes.
And it was not only just the community action, it was the other groups of USI
And UV
some
and
truck drivers and I think Gil kind of know what we were talking about. And I think his name is Jim.
Thank you. The House bill was 1450, and that's been passed. I don't see that we'll see anyone revisiting the stipulations within 1450. What it did it redefined seasonal workers and folks that were cafeteria workers and some of the teachers' aides and the bus drivers previously filed for unemployment in the summer, and they've been denied that opportunity. It hurt a lot of single parent families, folks who didn't make very much to start with. And what happened is the state decided that they would go ahead and give them the opportunity, and so locally folks were awarded this money, and then the state changed their mind, and so then people had to pay it back. And these are people who didn't have the money and don't have the money, and the opportunities are to pay back the money on a fixed schedule, which the dollar amount is determined in Indianapolis according to a formula, or they'll take away their refunds from their taxes if they in fact get a refund. Like I said, I don't see that you'll see the unemployment opportunities change. I think what's going to happen is that you all sit down with your employers and come up with a way that there is a stipend or something in the summer to help y'all, because I don't think that's going to change. The bill that I have now and have not been able to get a hearing on is to say that they will not collect the repayment because it really was the state's fault that you all were paid that. Now, there are some complications with that. I did add also to the bill, I have an amendment that says they can't take it from your tax refund. As a matter of fact, 60% of all of the repayments from the state come from tax refunds. So the payment plans, I guess, aren't very successful. They have to go to the tax refund. So I did add that. I don't know if I'm going to get a hearing. There is a lawsuit on this. It's affected people statewide. People in universities and cafeterias and on down. It's huge. It's thousands of people. I don't know where that lawsuit's going. I can only tell you that from my standpoint, I wish you all didn't have to make the repayment. I know that it's money you can't afford.
I did file a bill that would, and let me just give you history because I don't think a lot of people understood what really happened in this case. People got their unemployment and Work One, a lot of them went to local offices and they checked to see if they were eligible, and Work One said, yes, you're eligible. and we will send you your unemployment. And then they found out later they weren't eligible. And we found out when we discussed this in caucus this summer in the Senate Majority Caucus, Republican Caucus, was this happened in a lot of places. And what we found out was that Work One was under the gun from the federal government because they had had so many errors and federal errors in so many areas of unemployment, that they just decided to arbitrarily approve everybody. We're going to approve everybody for their unemployment, and then we'll take it back later. We'll decide that issue later. And so that's what the public doesn't really understand, is that these decisions were made by state government, and they knew that they were approving people that they shouldn't be approving, but they decided, we're going to go ahead and do this, and then we'll just come after them later. And so my bill just said that you wouldn't have to pay back what the state had said you were entitled to. My bill's not going to get a hearing because the chairman of Pensions and Labor in the Senate does not support this provision. And his point is that there were also people who found out that they weren't eligible and they didn't apply. And so they didn't get the unemployment benefit. And so to him, it's not fair to take it, reduce the penalties or the payback for those people who were approved, even though they were approved through no fault of their own. It was just a mistake. And so one thing I will say is that the Work One has said, or the Unemployment Insurance Fund has said, they will not come after people legally, and that you can pay as much as you can pay, but they're going to come after your tax checks. And that's a concern, I know, and I'm sorry that it's not going to be addressed, but unfortunately we have to have a lot more people. And there are people, Representative Ed Clare has this problem. It's a statewide issue, and I hope you win in the lawsuit. Oh, and this gentleman right here, Senator Toms, also is my co-author on that bill and supports it as well.
You also, we did meet with the folks that was involved with this late last summer, and right after that meeting, I was back in Indianapolis, and I did talk to Senator Kinley about this. At that time, he wasn't aware of what was taking place. And again, folks, it's I don't think the employers had even any problems with this. There was no opposition with the employers on those benefits being paid. Again, it's the fact that these people took that money, and somebody even called, because they spoke about this, they even called Workforce to find out if they were really entitled, and was told, yes, it is your money, go ahead. Well, they spent it. Naturally, we would. I mean, they would bought groceries, they paid utilities with that money, and I don't think there's a soul in this room would want to be treated like that. I don't think anybody in workforce development would be treated that way. They would be as resistant as we are. So it's only fair. A mistake was made. It was made on the behalf of the state, and I think the state needs to face up to that. And I fully support. I do. I think we've talked to Senator Kinley a couple times about this measure, and I know they're aware of it. But as Senator Becker said, I don't know if it's going to get a hearing or not.
Now, I just want to throw in just one thing, and that is, we want the government to run our health care. I mean, they can't get this kind of stuff right,
That's what they call the last word. Let's have a question now on House Bill 1294. This has to do with federal retirees taxation. A question from Paul Johnson. State.
The operative word is government.
Not represented here.
Yes, I'm Paul Johnson. I'm Regional Vice President for NARTH. That's the National Active and Retired Federal Employees Association. I represent over 36,000 federal retirees here in Indiana. And we have House Bill 1294 that was submitted by Representative Ed Clare. And I know it's going to be coming up for the Ways and Means Committee consideration, Suzanne, and I'm asking that you co-sponsor this and support us. We've been at this for some 15 years for equal taxation with Social Security, and we pay taxes just like anybody else does, and we think we're treated unfairly. So we just like to be treated fairly for a change.
Thank you. I was a co-author on that bill last year. If I'm not, I'll be sure I'm added. But one of the things, if in the event that it isn't heard in Ways and Means, what you might want to do is talk to your senators about considering having that language put on an amendment in a bill in the Senate. In the House, we can't do that. If there's a bill, language in a bill, we can't amend that language onto another bill. It's called bill pending, but I don't believe they have that rule in the Senate, and maybe something that if we can't get it out of the House, that may be a way to address it on that side of the aisle, or on that side in that House. Thanks.
I guess I would just say that the Senate may not have that rule, but we have the chairman rule. And what that means is if the chairman didn't give it a hearing, you're not going to see it offered as a second reading amendment. So I think the issue needs to be dealt with as a bill, and I have always supported making it more fair and equitable for everybody. And I still, because I do think we lose a lot of senior citizens out of our state because of our taxation policies on their pensions. And so I think we need to be more welcoming to senior citizens because of all the spending power that they have as well. I think we would benefit in the long run.
Just to echo this strong support there as well, and I think that there has been something that I've seen in the legislature on the House side this year that I hadn't seen before, and that is a recognition of our senior citizens and what they do for the state of Indiana. So I think that the environment is there.
Sorry, I thought you gave me recognition. So. It's okay. I've spoken with Paul many times about this particular issue and happy to sign on if there's enough space on the bill. The thing about it is, you see, there is a lot of, I've got 2 bills that ask for tax cuts for veterans and all sorts of things, and everybody's got their little piece that they want. And ultimately what it comes down to is what's going to make it through. And they will look at the fiscal impact of whatever that particular bill is going to be. I like a lot of times if you could have statistics, and you brought me, I believe, an article last time that showed me what the impact is when seniors leave Indiana because they go to a more tax-friendly location, the impact on our sales or revenue and that sort of thing. So I think if we can change the argument of the benefits of these tax cuts or these, special reductions or whatever they might be, to looking at here's the benefit to the state, here's the amount of money that you'll gain in revenue because they're staying and not leaving, and maybe focus on looking at them from a different perspective. Not on what you as an individual or the retirees gain from it, but what does the state gain from all of these tax initiatives. And I think maybe if we change the way that we approach the argument as a benefit to the state, that might, not just on this issue, but many issues, on the ability of people to have disposable incomes. I think that might change the perspective and allow us to get a lot of these things we've been trying for years to get done. Thanks.
Okay. Sure. Again, I appreciate you all coming here to hear us out, and I appreciate that because your time's valuable. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, a question now on the Common Core from Martha Stott.
Good morning. I'm Martha Stott from Evansville. there's a lot of chatter going on the internet about Common Core, and I'm just interested in seeing, everybody doesn't have to speak to this if you got the same perspective, who is for Common Core?
Okay, and Common Core is education standards handed down from the federal government and adopted by, 46 states now or something like that, so. Sure.
Yeah, and if you're for Common Core, I'd like to know why, because this program, from what I gather from the internet, is really not best for the state of Indiana, and some states are taking a second look at it. It's a copyrighted program, which means that we have lost local control. So I'd like to, those that are for it, I'd like for you to say why you are for it.
And if you're against it, maybe we'd like to hear that too. Do you want to bring an opposing viewpoint to that? Yeah. Or I guess that would be a supporting viewpoint in this case, right?
Hi, I'm Sarah Batliner. I'm a teacher with UVSC. I've looked at the Common Core, and I understand that there's pushback because they are a national set of standards, so yes, it takes away local control. However, our students move in between states, and especially here being in the UVSC, we have students coming in from Illinois and Kentucky, and so when I get a student in, and we're getting ready to go into equations, and they haven't even had integers yet, that's a problem. Not only that, but the Indiana state standards, I can get away with teaching a rule, whereas with Common Core, I have to teach why that works. The student has to understand that adding the opposite, the reason I do that is because I didn't have any negatives, and so I had to add a pair of opposites, a negative and a positive, which makes 0, so that I can take away those. And they have to understand that. And if they don't understand that, then when they move on to algebra, which they have to pass in order to graduate, they're going to struggle. And so these Common Core standards, I love them. They make sense. And not only that, but in the elementary right now, with Indiana State Standards, they get a little bit of number sense, they get a little bit of geometry, a little bit of algebra and functions, a little bit of statistics and probability. Common Core shifts that to, in elementary, they get number sense. They're going to learn how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide before they move on to anything with algebra or ratios and proportions, which that's the foundation. And whenever I'm trying to teach students how to do these upper level things, and they don't know their multiplication because they've had to spend a little bit of time here, a little bit of time there, and a little bit of time here, instead of focusing on that, that's a problem for me, because now here I have to go all the way back. I mean, I'm going back to like 3rd grade standards to teach what a fraction is, because some of my students don't understand that. And that's the foundation for everything I'm teaching. Whereas with the Common Core, it's focusing on that, and they really have to understand that at the beginning. And then when I get to middle school, they have that foundation. They have a solid foundation. So now I can actually go further with them because they're able to understand that.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for bringing this question, because I had a lot of people coming up to me in the hallway and asking my opinion. My transformation to the Common Core, we knew it was coming. We knew the transition was coming, and so teachers, in my opinion, were well prepared to transition to the Common Core. And so my school has been teaching using Common Core for the last 3 years. And so I asked my 2 school corporations, Mount Vernon and EVSC, to give me feedback on what their teachers felt was Common Core versus state standards. And I think, to my own experience, Indiana standards were ranked number 1. Okay, the reason they're ranked number 1, they didn't exclude anything. I mean, we had everything you had to teach, and you could never get through all the standards. And it was just like, what is it, an inch, deep. And we tried as you might. My teachers, I've found overwhelmingly by asking, math teachers are in support of Common Core. And EVSC, I believe, and can correct me if I'm wrong, has spent $1.4 million in textbooks to address the Common Core. So from my perspective, Common Core gives us the opportunity to compare apples to apples. We can now say we're number 1 in the nation compared to other people who take the Common Core. As far as taking a little bit from the state standards that we did have, there's nothing saying that we can't add those things, that there were best practices or best parts of the standards that we had in Indiana. We're still working through the transition part of what the testing looks like for Common Core. Those of you in the EVSC know we do PARC. Those questions, in my opinion, at least on the high school level, were extremely difficult. In the English part, I don't even want to get into it, but it was very difficult. But at least with the Common Core, it gives us the opportunity to compare apples to apples. And I think in the global scheme of things, because we're not an isolated entity in the world anymore, when we can compare ourselves to other folks, that makes all the difference in the world. Now, with that said, I think it gives teachers the opportunity to use the standards or look back to the standards that we did have. I don't know that it takes away local control, because you still have the freedom and opportunities in the classroom that you did before. For me, the upsides are being able to do that comparison. I don't know if that's an economic advantage. I don't, being able to compare, but I think it might be. Personally, I look at it from my teacher's perspective, and they seem to be happy with it. So it's fine with me.
Thank you. Sure.
I just throw in that it's not a commentary on a Common Core, but I am philosophically opposed to national standards. I'm philosophically opposed to state standards. I think that it's fine if a local school board wants to adopt a national standard like Common Core. That's why we have local school boards. And it's getting ridiculous how much authority we're trying to give to our state government and to our national government on what is essentially a very local issue, and that we have school boards that are elected to handle this kind of stuff. And I would love to force it down that way.
Thank you. To a point, I'm a strong believer in local control. I'm on the local government, and those know I'm a strong believer, but I do think that the state needs to set policy, guidelines, direction, because it gives everyone that opportunity on the local level to accept or reject those. And one of the things came out, and I'll mention this since we brought it up, out of the House this week, and it was a bill that actually did away with all the requirements or basic guidelines for hiring a superintendent in a school corporation. And I absolutely was floored. And the value of that to those who support it is local control. I believe in local control, but I also believe that you must set standards. If you don't set standards, you won't meet those standards. And I believe that it's very important that we do have this direction and some consensus from the state level regarding this. The first time I ever really understood Common Core, and I thank you for explaining it to me. So I would give that perspective that there are that getting things from direction from the state is not always bad.
Well, I know Senator Schneider has a bill addressing the Common Core, and it's been discussed a little bit in caucus, not to a great deal. I know there was I think a large committee meeting on this, and I don't know all the details either. I do like to hear that people in the profession and what their input is, they should know. But I'm like Tom Washburn too. We don't want the federal government handling our financial affairs. We've seen what they do with that. And now we want them in our education. You know, when I was growing up, it's so different today. This morning, listen to the discussion this morning about education before we come over here. It was just back then, the teachers and the principals and the schools controlled it, and they set the directions, they set the tone for the day of what was going to be learned. They understood the students. And it seems like over the years, the government has gotten more and more involved in the educational aspect, and it seems like everything they touch, they soil it. I don't want to be negative about federal government, but I'm going to be honest with you. We're at a point now where government is going to tell me whether I can drink a big gulp or I got to have a soda pop less than 16 ounces. You know, I don't know whether some of these people up there could find their own food dish, and they're telling me how to live. there's a point that we have to, as a state, we got to recognize, enough's enough. We can think for ourselves. We do have people in different professions out here that can make decisions. They understand closer about what it is in their backyard as opposed to somebody 700 miles away making decisions for them. So I just want to share that with you because when we discuss these things, there's other aspects of the argument that I bring in, and I don't look at it from a pinpoint view here. I understand that there's a lot of things we must consider. And again, when we do something, when we allow the federal government to step in and make a decision for us, generally that's permanent. That is dyed in wool. That is a brand we'll never get rid of again. And I want to be very cautious that before we take on programs, that we're sure that we've looked beyond first blush as what this will really do for us and whether we could ever roll it back if it turns out not to be what we thought. So I just want to share that with you.
Thanks.
Well, you've probably heard more than you wanted about this issue, but I will just share with you, as Senator Tom said, we have a bill and we have discussed it in caucus. It has not come out of the Education Committee yet, I don't think. And I think the new superintendent, Glenda Ritz, has said that she would like to have the opportunity just to slow it down a little bit and maybe look at what we're doing more carefully before we make a decision one way or the other. And I guess that would be my take on it as well. I think we need to be very cautious. I can tell you that when we talk about local control, and I do support local control, but unfortunately, all these other laws over the years, when the state took over the majority of funding for public schools, they took over control.
That's right.
Unfortunately. And that's what has happened to public schools. And that's why we're in the mess we're in right now. With vouchers and all of this stuff. It's because those who have the gold rule. And that's unfortunate because we used to, I think that our local school boards, that's what they're elected for, and they ought to be able to decide all of these issues to the best interest of our community with input from others.
Okay. We are just about, we're reaching the end, and we do want to give about a minute for closing remarks. And so 1 minute is half of 2 minutes. That's half the time that you had. So just some brief closing remarks. Would someone like to start us off?
I'll go ahead. Thank you all for being here. Government works best when people are engaged in part of the process. And I would ask that as we continue to move forward, you keep those of us up here in your thoughts and your prayers so that we make the right decisions as they affect Hoosiers. Thank you.
I want to thank you as well for coming out today. I'm encouraged by the number of folks that continue to come out and ask great questions. And like Representative Crouch says, make sure to contact us and let us know of your concerns, issues. And a lot of times, and we've talked about it today, there are a lot of bills that we don't know that are out there. There are a lot of 600 bills that were introduced into the House alone. And we have enough time really to look at the ones that are ours in our committee and then when they get to the House floor. So if you find a particular part of a bill, use your expertise, please contact us and let us know. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming out. It's one of the wonders of life that reasonable, intelligent, well-meaning people can disagree on issues. And it's one of the testaments to the United States of America and its 50 states that we can do this in this kind of public forum and come out of it as friends. And so I thank you all for coming. And I know the room's kind of divided on a lot of issues. Let's not let that division hurt friendships or all of our desire to make this state the greatest in the union.
I hate to go after that. That was really nice. Thank you. Being the lone wolf up here, it's sometimes a little difficult.
You're the wolf?
Yeah, I am. Anyway, I do want to thank you. And any input in particular on the issues that I'm dealing with on the children's issues, in particular the Oversight Commission and the Child Fatality Review, we're at the point where we're combining 3 bills. I need all the help. I've got my email out there. Would love to hear from you. Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't realize. I thank you for your input. And as always, I think we as representatives and senators do a better job if we hear from the people who we represent. And I appreciate it when we hear from somebody before we vote on something rather than afterwards, and then they say, why did you do this or why did you do that? I think your input is vital, and we appreciate the opportunity of representing you in the State House.
Well, I want to thank you for being here and allow me to be here as well to speak about these issues. And I have some brochures out here. I invite you to pick some up before you leave to read about some of the measures we're dealing with. My opening remarks, I was talking about bills that we deal with or issues that may not appear in the paper. And I have several bills that I've worked on this year. One was the consolidation effort that we got passed, that bill just passed out of the Senate this week. Addresses the consolidation problems we had here last year on this. Also, I've got a bill about the fraudulent tax refund that people are getting, illegals in particular, that's been built in the state. But I want to mention two things here, two bills, and I may go over just a minute if I might, Mike, on this here. But bills that may sound frivolous or foolish, before you pass judgment, and I see sometimes the comments on the internet when they read the newspapers electronically, the people that write comments, they don't have to give their name, and so they go full bore. But there's a reason some of these bills are introduced, and so it may sound foolish to some, but to others it's important. And I'll just give you two instances. The switchblade knife bill that I got passed out of the Senate on 47-0. I had 4 Democrat senators on board with that legislation. Now, some people might make fun that the bill was to repeal a ban on switchblade knives that was imposed in 1953, and nobody understands what it was about. But there's emergency personnel would like to have that tool to use in emergency situations. Cutting a seatbelt loose of a crash victim. People that are handicapped that could use a pocket knife for a change. So rather than somebody that, we have a House member that's signed on to that bill on the House side, lost an arm in Vietnam. Some people, I ask, how do you think somebody would open a pocket knife with one hand? You understand there's a purpose behind this bill. For some, they may laugh, but for others, it's not a laughing matter. And just the last thing I want to mention to you, the bill that I introduced early last year, I had this bill drafted last summer about drones. We don't talk much about our liberties and freedoms and privacy much in these committee meetings, or these legislative meetings. However, I put together some language to address the invasion of our privacy with the use of drones over our civilian population. That was back this summer in June. Now, it got a lot of ridicule. The bill went right to the Rules Committee, where the bills go to when they die. It wasn't going to be given any consideration. I was taking a lot of ribbon up there from my colleagues, and that's fine because I got thick skin. I can take that. But I told them all, I said, they will come when you won't laugh about this. In 2 years, they expect about 30,000 drones to be used over the skies of this country. Now, in the last few days, you've seen all the national reports about the federal government is willing to use drones, not just to surveil, but to use them to kill citizens with. That was the White House paper. So I just want to mention that to you. Now it's going to get a hearing. The senators that was laughing now are not laughing no more. They come into my office and want to be signed on to the bill. I just want to point out, folks, that there's reasons why we do what we do, and sometimes there's more to the story than what you'll see in the paper. I just want to share it with you. And thank you for letting me be here. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for coming.